Hello, my name is Jan Thielemann, and in this video I want to talk about how you can import data into iDempiere. There are different ways how you could import data. For example, you can use web services, but in this video I want to talk about the CSV import. So here in the system admin data import directory in the menu, you have import file loader. And this window is used to load XLS files or CSV files into a specified table with a given format. So before I can start importing data, I first need a new window to which the data then should be imported, and I also need an import table. So I already created the SQL statements for my main table, for my subtable, and for an import table. So when you import, what you want to do is to create an import table in which you load your text files, and then you use a process to process the entries from the import table to create the entries in the main and the subtable. So I copy this and run it on my database. So now I have the three tables on my database and I can create them in iDempiere. I start with the main table, which is EVE main. By the way, if you create custom tables, I recommend you to use the 3-character prefix for your tables. And this is my main table. It should be accessible from all levels, so I can access this from system client as well as from all other clients. Save this one and create my columns. Okay. As you see, there are only two custom columns I will use, the name column and the value column. So create a second table, which is EVE sub, which is my subtable. It's also accessible from everywhere. And finally create my import table, which is IEVE window. Okay. So here I have some important columns I want to talk about. The first one is the I is imported column. This column is to show the user if the entry was imported or not. If it was not imported, then I have the I error message to provide the error message why it is not imported. Then I have the processing column, which indicates that the entry is currently being processed. And I have a processed column. No, this one is the processed column is to determine if the entry is currently being processed, and this one is to start the process. Or is this one to start the process? Let me check this real quick. So I go to one of the other import tables right here. Yes, the processing column is to start the import process, and the processed column is to indicate that this entry is currently being processed. And then I have the main name and main value, where I will enter my main entry's name and value, and for the subtable I also have columns for name and value. Okay. So then I have to go to my import table, go to the processing column, and as you see here, by default it's a yes/no reference, but it has to be a process. So I choose button right here, and then I have to select a process, but currently there is no process, so I will create it. That's the import p window. So save this one, and here I want to create a new parameter, and I will use this parameter to delete entries which are already imported. So I call it delete out, and this is a yes/no checkbox. Then I can select the process right here and save my entry. So the next thing is to create the windows. So here I create a new window for my main and subtab. Create my fields. Create a subtab, which is tab level 1. And create my fields here too. And then I create my import window. Then I have to have create menu entries. And now I have my window here, where I can enter some value in the main tab. And also something in the subtab. So yeah, I forgot to check this column to be the parent link column. I do this really quick. So this is the parent link column. And now it should find the the main entry automatically when I create a new entry here. Now, yeah, as you can see now, the main entry is set automatically. And here's my import window with my process button automatically set as a toolbar button, and here I could enter things manually, or I can load a CSV file into this. And to do this, you go to System Admin, Data, Data Import, Import Loader Format, and here you create a new loader format. Here for the format you can specify how the text file should be read. For example, you could use a comma to separate, you can use a tabulator to separate entries, or use fixed positions if every line has the same amount of characters, but I want to use a custom separator, which is the semicolon. And then I have to specify my fields. So the first field is my main name. Which is a string. And it starts in the first place. So now I create the main value. Which is the second field in my text file. The subname. Which is the third field, and finally the sub value, which is the fourth field. Okay, save this, and yeah, now I'm done with my import format. So I already created a simple CSV file. As you can see here in the square brackets, I specified the names of my columns so I get a better overview, and here I entered some values. For example, I have the same main entry and two different sub entries. Here I have one main entry with one sub entry, and here I only have a main entry without any sub entries. I already exported this, so now I can go to System Admin, Data, Data Import, Import File Loader. Select my CSV file and choose my import format I just created. Now if I use these buttons here, I can go through the CSV file and check if it fits. So yeah, make sure that when you create your import format, the first field has the 1, not the 0 like in programming. Okay, so this should be okay. Now I can click on import, and you see they are get imported, otherwise there would be a 0 here. So if I check my import window, I now see the entries. And if you put something in the square brackets, like I did with my headlines, then an empty entry is created here, which I can delete because I don't need it. In my import window, I can check again if everything was set correctly. And now I can import it. But I haven't written an import process, so this is the next thing I do. And to do this, I go to my Eclipse, and here I first create a new plugin, which is in the plugin development section. I uncheck this checkbox because I don't want my plugin to be located in the iDempiere main repository. I use the Equinox OSGI framework. and the Java 6 execution environment, because it can always happen that a client still uses Java 6. So I click on Finish. And now I have to create a process and a process factory. So I first create a new package. With a new class. I believe I called this process import EVE window, but let me check it. Oh, I stopped the server. So I run the server, and while the server starts I create the next package. Yeah, the process factory has to implement the iProcess factory interface. Oh, I forgot to set the dependencies, so open the manifest, go to the dependencies tab and add the org iDempiere base plugin and the org iDempiere plugin utils. So now I can implement the iProcess factory. And here I have this method where I get a class name and then I should return a class. So yeah, let me check how I called the process. This, and yeah, you see the class name provided here fits my class name here. It don't have to, but yeah, since this comes from an older functionality which already exists in iDempiere and Compia, I like to do it this way. So yeah, I copy the class name, and here in my process factory I check if the class name I get from the system equals the class name I entered in the process, and if it does, then I return a new instance of my import process. As you see, it is red because yeah, I should return a process call, but this is now not a process call yet, so here I extend the server process. And now it should be okay. Then I also need a component definition, so the framework can know about my process factory. And here I have to provide a unique name, and what I like to do is to use the plugin name followed by process factory, and then I'm sure that this name is unique through the whole application. I also have to select my process factory. And add the service ranking property, which is an integer, so I give it a value of 100. And this property is used by the OSGI framework to determine the order of all the process factories which get loaded. So I want mine to be loaded first, and therefore I put the service ranking property in that. On the services tab I have to provide the iProcess factory service, and that's it. Now I can look in my manifest and check if the service component entry was created, which is normally created by Eclipse. So yeah, this one is okay. And now I can start implementing my import process. So the first thing I want to do here is to create a boolean for my parameter. And then I have to check the parameters, which is an array of process info parameters. Then I get the parameter name. And check if name equals the parameter I provided in my process, which is delete old. And here the parameter name is not the name of the parameter in the application dictionary, but the column name. So here I check if it's delete old. And if it is delete old, then my delete old boolean equals get parameter as boolean, because I want a boolean. It's a yes no checkbox. And what this method does is, it first checks if there is a parameter. If not, then it returns false. If the parameter is a boolean, then it gives me the boolean value. And if not, and normally in iDempiere yes no checkbox have the characters y and n. So here it checks if y equals the parameter, and if so, I get the boolean value. So I also add an else statement here, because if the parameter is not the delete old parameter, and I normally should only have one parameter, then I want to log a warning that my parameter is unknown. Okay, now I have to implement the import right here, and here I could use a prepared statement, for example, to load me the value from the database, but I also need to create new entries in the other table, and I don't want to do this with SQL. I would rather use model classes. So what I do now is to create a new package. And here I create my model classes in, and I can use the model generator here to generate these models. When it starts, I have to select the location, so I go to my plugin, provide the package name, and first I create my main and sub table entries, which are user maintained. So you see two classes for each table are created. And now I create the classes for the import table. So I select the source folder again. And it was called iDempiere, I believe, which were also user maintained. And I need a model factory. So let's create a new class here. So I implement a model factory. And in this method I just like in a process factory check for the table name, and if the table name is one of my tables, then I return my model classes. I talked about model classes and model factories in another video. You can take a look at this, and I see you when I implemented the model factory. So as you can see, I just implemented the model factory, I return the different model classes based on the table name. I created a new component definition where I provide the iModel factory service, and yeah, my model factory provides this, the unique name, and the component was added here. So now I can use these models in my code. So the first thing I do is to delete the old imported. So if delete old, then I want to delete all the old imported entries. And yeah, I will just copy me the code from another import process because I'm very lazy. So yeah, what I do is just create a little SQL statement where I delete all the entries which are already imported. And then, yeah, just log the number of entries which I deleted. So when I did this, the next thing is to load all the entries and process them. The entries from my import table. So to do this, I create a list of xi window and then I query the entries from the table. So I can use the context from the process. The table name is xiv window dot table name. The where clause, I will create a string for this, and I can use the transaction from the process. And then I have to use the list method from the query. So, my where clause. I want to load all the entries which are not processed. So I can type in xiv window column name processed is like no. So here I now get all the entries which are not processed already, and then I can start iterating over these entries. So the first thing I do here is to set true to the processing and save the entry. Yeah, normally it's recommended to use the save X method and catch exceptions if there occur exceptions, but this import process is so simple and just for the showcase, so I don't want to do all the error handling. I believe that you are familiar with error handling in Java, and you can do this by yourself. So what I do is now I set the entries to being processed, and then I create my main and sub entries. So first I need the xv main last parent, which is null at the beginning. And then I check if the last parent is null, or if the last parent get name is not so when it's not the same name as my import entry, then I need to create a new parent entry. So I use the get main getter here, and if this is not true, and the same goes if the last parent get value, yeah. So now in the first run I will create a new parent entry, or every time the last used or created parent is not equal to the import entry. So in my case, the first run I will create a new main entry. In the second run, the name and value are the same and the parent is not null, so I don't create a new entry. But in the third run, when the second entry comes into play, then the name and the value are different, and then I create a new main entry. So here I create a new xv main, and to create new entries you use the 0 ID, and this will automatically create a new entry for you. And of course I have to save this entry. But first I want to set the name to the import entries get main name, and I want to set the value. Oops. Like this. Yes, so now I have created my main entries, and then all I have to do is to check if the last parent is not null, so I can create my sub-entries. And here I first want to check if I have a name and a value, a name or a value for my sub-entry, because otherwise it could throw me exceptions. So I check if the import entry get subname punct length is greater than 0, and the imp entry get sub value is greater. Okay, I don't need the value key, because iDempiere can create this for me. So I will just check for the main for the sub name. That should be okay. So if I have a sub entry, which is not the case for the third entry here, for example, then I do the same thing again. I create a new entry for the xeve subtable. And here I use the subname as well as the value. Also, I have to reference the main entry, so I set the EV main ID to the last parent's main ID. And here again, normally you would use the savex methods and catch exceptions, but I just use the save. So yeah, if you would catch an exception, what you then would do is the imp entry set the iError message. So when I catch an exception, I set the iError message and is imported to false. But in my case, I don't need to handle this, so I just set the imported to true. And save the entry. So now that should be enough for my simple import process. No, I don't want this. I want to start my server. So here I am. You see my window is just filled with my test entry I created manually. I have my import table with the lines I imported from the CSV file. And now I process this. I don't need to delete all because there are no old entries. And I get an error, of course, because I forgot to start my plugin. So I go to run configuration server and find my import plugin right here. That's maybe the most common mistake I make during development. I forget to start my plugins. So now I can go to my import window and run my import process. And I get a null pointer exception. Let me check this really quick. So here I'm back again. And obviously I forgot one pipe here. And I also made another mistake. I checked for the length of the subname without checking if the subname is not null. So okay, now you just saw that the first parent entry was created. Which is this one right here, the first entry. So now it should create me the first sub-entry. Yes, nice. And now on the second run, the parent entry didn't change. So I jumped over this, and the second sub-entry is created. Now in the third run, the second main entry should be created. Yes. You can see it right here. And also the sub-entry for this entry gets created, and now the third main entry gets created, and no sub-entry was created. And the process finished. So if I refresh this, I see they are all imported, they are all processed, they don't have error messages. And if I take a look at my window, then I see my new entries. The first entry with the 2 sub-entries, the second entry and the third entry. Yeah, and that's how you import data via CSV files into iDempiere. I hope this video helps you, and I see you in the next video.